Welcome to the State of Human Design, Monday, May 17th at 8 p.m. We are your hosts, Jonah Dempsey and Michael Stenbaek Litven.
Today the sun is in gate 8, line 3.
That's
Maybe,
right.
something like that.
We are on the
Baseline date.
cross of contagion. We are just having a little 3-5 cross of contagion babies being born. I love Ra's thing that that everyone in the world waved to you when you were born or said hi to you when you were born.
That's cool.
Because they experienced the transits, the astro weather of that time. Yeah, I like that idea. So today I have a few fun questions and I have a few fun comments and just kind of want to get some ideas of what Mike thinks about these. So let's see. Okay. Conspiracy theories and Penta.
Cool.
What do you think about that?
I like that. That makes sense. It's a imprinting device, the Penta.
Okay. But yeah, it is. It's the thing that kind of, or that they enlist us. We get enlisted by Pentas.
You know what else it is? It's an enabling field. It's complicit in abuse. When if someone is mistreating you, that mistreatment takes on a whole new level of power if there's a couple witnesses around in a Penta, and it's kind of glossed over.
Oh, right, because the Penta can cover things up. Yeah, that can really happen. Yeah, for those who
all conditioning is a smoothing out, and that Penta provides a really concrete example of that.
Oh, I've never actually thought of it that way. So okay, yeah.
If you're conditioned, then you live your life generically because you fall into a role.
Smoothly.
Yes,
oh,
yes.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. Right. It's like it's a smoothing out in terms of how you go along together, and Penta kind of sweeps you up into something. It kind of enlists you in something bigger than it. And then through that, I think the law is really the matrix that's superimposed over the group of pentas. So Wa is not really a transoric form in the way Penta is. Penta is a transoric form in that a Penta can have a life of its own in some sense. Has a life of its own. A Penta really does have a life of its own. It is a being. It's a coherent being. It's just one that we don't really understand very well because we have a hard time understanding how a being could appear and vanish from existence. But it appears as soon as the aura contact is made, and it vanishes when the aura contact is broken. And I've almost thought of it. I've almost thought of it like there's a game called Metal Gear Solid 4 where there's nanomachines. And you can link with your teammates, and then you can see them once you're linked. It's like aura link. It's like Penta. It's like you're in the Penta. You're linked. And once you're linked, you can kind of see them glowing and vibrating, and you're connected to them with lines that connect you all, even through walls and so on. It's superimposed. And of course, if somebody hacks you, they can get access to that, or you can hack the enemy, and then you can see that they're all linked together too. The whole idea of Penta as conspiracy to me is really that conspiracy theories are like a game of telephone. And as a game of telephone, they just get distorted, and there's information loss. And in some sense, Penta degrades. I don't mean literally that somebody told somebody about Penta and then somebody else thought of it as conspiracy theory. I just mean that there are sort of these organic, spontaneous, natural conclusions that people arrive at that give rise to conspiracy theories at a certain level of information loss from the mutative core where the new information is emerging, effectively. And I would almost hate to say that the person who has no interest in human design and no interest in conspiracy is almost less mutative, that in some sense, although I think that mutative people can come from all walks of life, but I think what's going to happen is whatever world, it's almost some context where the conspiracy theorist people, it's just really sad that they have not been able to work their way or claw their way back up the fractal line, so to speak. I mean, I guess you can't. I guess you can't move your position on it. That's an interesting idea also. It depends how literally we're using the term fractal line.
That's a base theory discovery?
Well, no, I mean, I've always known that you're on a fractal line, and that also people are a certain amount of degrees from each other on fractal lines, and that you discover, the way we use the term fractal line and, human design would be that you really discover somebody is really on your fractal. I mean, to be on your fractal just means they've entered into your life in some way. And there's people that are like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 generations down that are like removed. It's like, how did you end up here? How did you end up in this room? You have to like really squint your eyes to see them as one of your people, right? Whereas there's other people, you walk into the room and you can just tell this person's your person. Or there's people you just have no way of knowing, and then years later, you've known them for such a long time and it dawns on you and you didn't realize. So it can happen all different ways, right? But realizing somebody is really on your fractal is basically like first generation fractal from you can communicate information to them in a way that they understand completely. Second generation fractal, and vice versa, they can communicate to you. Second generation fractal, there's a little bit of information loss. Third generation, you have to like dumb it down a little more. Fourth generation, you have to paint it with kid gloves on, and so on, until there's a point where you really don't even try. You can't even begin to want to explain it to somebody because there's no reason to. And it's not just about explanation, it's about any sort of information transfer or connection. And that those, but the thing is, there's also the actual position you are on the fractal line, sort of your proximity, your personality crystal's proximity to the Big Bang, if we can call it that. And that's the very esoteric base theory side of it, where, that's like a very fun idea, which is that, at the beginning of time, at the beginning of space-time, the Big Bang and all this stuff, there was a collision point between these two crystals of consciousness, and they shattered. And that's what actually created the bases, that the crystals were sheer, they were smooth, they were completely smooth. And the shattering broke them into ways that they actually shattered along particular dimensions. Now the interesting thing is, there's no 5-sided equidistant 3-dimensional shape. Please, YouTube people, please tell me if I'm wrong, or please post any references to 5-sided shapes. Really interesting to see. Maybe it's like equidistant sides or something, or not equidistant, but surface, equal surfaces. In any case, there's some interesting properties. Like if you try to imagine a 5-sided object, so these base crystals, which are the actual crystals themselves, or the base is really the frequency based on the it's the frequency. It's the frequency which is also correlates to a particular face of the crystal. And the interesting thing is, these crystals are sent on a trajectory moving through space, and I don't really understand how this works unless the expansion of the universe in dark matter basically allows this sort of bubbling out, like dandelion movement, but not equal, because as Rod points out in the cosmology materials, Rave Cosmology, the center, the middle is not in the center. Like it hit at an angle in some sense. It's almost like an explosion where there's like different densities at different parts of the explosion and so on. And it's oblong, right? And in any case, the crystals are moving out, and as things are expanding in dark matter, they're really just expanding uniformly. So imagine in dark matter crystallized, that's shattered. Then what happens when the universe expands? The universe starts moving apart, but the ones that were closest to that center are still there. Now, meanwhile, what's happening in the universe atomically is also expanding. Everything's moving around, rotating, and happening in the atomic universe. But these dark matter crystals, but here's the thing that's so weird, because if the actual personality crystal that's shattered is floating above your head, and the design crystal is nestled here, and the artist object's moving in space, then it seems like in some sense, they are continually linked to our physical location in space, even as we are in a space that is expanding outward. Now, this is some very mystical metaphysical territory, because this is where Rob begins to say really cryptic things like, there's not actually a time you die, there's a place.
Cool.
And these like fantastically cryptic, comments, but about how we are always going to new places in some sense. But to bring it back to, we'll get to conspiracy as penta in a minute, but then back to the idea of fractal lines and how communication works, because this also relates to conspiracy. I think Ra talks about fractal lines. His examples of how he uses it are how someone has a mystical experience at a certain point in history, and then it gets passed on down the fractal, so to speak, and then by the 20th or 30th person, due to the game of telephone, they've completely, irrevocably lost all the information content from it, and it's turned into something else completely. And it's just the nature of how information travels, where you're not able to get it from the source, or if you're not, and also if it's used and abused for different purposes and so on. And so the example he uses is like mystical experiences that result in organized religion committing atrocities. That's like further down the fractal line from somebody's mystical experience. But the people having the mystical experiences are always really the mutative edge. And so I think this idea of mutative edge or mutative core is also used by Ra when he talks about how the sort of design crystals, and I guess the personality crystals rather, not design crystals, the personality crystals, which are part of the mutative edge, are always part of the mutative edge in every single incarnation. In every single incarnation, because they are in a fixed position. This is what I meant by a fixed place in the fractal line. So when I say crawl your way up or claw your way up the fractal line, I'm joking. I'm saying like find your rightful place. If you are front row from the Big Bang, part of that mutative edge, find your way to those mutative people. Claw your way out of, what was it recently? Knoxville. We were talking to people from Knoxville who were saying they didn't really feel like Knoxville had the mutative thing for them. Now, even if they're 5, 6, 7, 10, 15 generations down the fractal line, which I don't think they are, I think they're probably closer than that, but even no matter how much farther down they are, there are still metaphors and versions of the same journey, which could even just be moving to a city. There's a guy who did a one-man play on growing up in West Virginia called I Was a Fat Kid, I Was a Really, Really Fat Kid. Or I was a really fat kid, and he does this whole one-man play and talks about growing up in West Virginia, working at Dairy Queen and eating the potato things out of his pockets and all this stuff, and then not really knowing about any other way of living, and then going out to Olympia, Washington, of all places, where you lived, with little places like Psychic Sister doing astrology and tarot and all this stuff, which again are a few degrees removed from human design, but are still closer to that mutative core. And then he came back and he was telling everybody, guys, you can screen print. You can make your own shirts. Like he was, this is mutation at work. It's not like it's a foreign concept. It's what Adam Phillips talks about when he says that the role of art and the role of all artists and the role of all writers and everyone is really to give to society alternate ways of being and living and seeing things and thinking about things and doing things and so that other people, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but he says, you give people ideas so that other people can then get rid of their ideals that have been instilled in them, conditioned in them by their church, by their family, by their whatever it is, their friend group, and instead they can start to have ideas of other ways of being. Hey, we can screen print. Hey, we can do this, and so on. And that's this kind of finding your way to this, because the other ways of doing things are always going to be part of the mutative. Because you can do things, some people are perfectly happy doing things in the non-mutative way. Jung discovered this. What he called it was individuation. And he said his first question when he had someone come to him is, what is appropriate for them? Is this a person who needs to stabilize or adapt, basically, or is this a person who's on the path of individuation, which can be like anything from spiritual awakening to what's called Kundalini awakening to psychosis experiences, madness experiences, all sorts of things. Jung himself knew this personally after going through this for 15 years. Ra went through a phase of 7 years of madness leading up to his human design encounter, which itself was a moment of madness. And somehow, even after that, he was mad. There's stories of him, he didn't want, people would come to him for human design. He didn't want to do it. He would chase them, they woke him up one day, and the angry wrath of the manifestor, he chased them down the hill, peeing on them the whole time. Naked, peeing on them. It's like such an angry manifestor move. Just, So, it's so interesting to see how that works. I love it. I love it. Okay, but you can see how the mutative fractal line, so going back to that, at any given point in history, go back to ancient Greece or whatever, the mutative stuff was happening, or Plato, Aristotle, some of this has been saved. Some of it wasn't lost in the burning of the Library of Alexandria and all the other destructions. And some of it has been saved. And we've seen mutative cores. For instance, Jung studied alchemy, and the alchemists were absolutely part of the mutative edge of Christian theological thought, during, and also Arabic thought, Persian thought, these different, there's so much interesting alchemical work that was very mutative or came from really mutative things. Now there's also Shakespeare, there's also, you can see, and then one of the interesting things is there's a criticism of this, that the sort of history that we have is the history of dead white European males. And that's a valid criticism. I would just add that what human design tells us is that at any sufficiently historical moment, there were always probably people from very different, very diverse backgrounds. So I have the hypothesis that there were probably Black and or Indigenous and or people of color present in the cultures of most historically mutative places. And this is not something I've been able to demonstrate and so on, but I just think that that's naturally going to occur when you look at how mutation works and how the third line works and how the confluence of different cultures coming together works. So yeah, this is just kind of, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because that's kind of my pet theory.
I also think that the mutation is going to be doing work on different levels in different places, in a way building different organs or performing different functions, and some of those need to be more public than others. So when you talk about someone like Shakespeare's work being saved, or Plato or whatever, the stuff that is retained in the canon or whatever, I think that there is a weird self-selection process of the mutation where in order to accomplish certain mutations, things are less public, things are less known. The mutation still comes out, it just comes out in a less conspicuous way. It bleeds out through other places. Like, think about how much mutation has come about through totally anonymous folk tales or folk wisdom. Or
okay, that's a great point, that there actually are changes, right, that there are sea changes.
Because think about it, when you hear a teaching and you know it comes from Plato, it means something different to you than if you hear the same teaching from an anonymous fairy tale from even before that, or whatever, or recently, or whatever. It's like the time and place and author or whatever all inform someone's reading of whatever the teaching is. So if the teaching is really attempting to impart itself in the most perfect way possible through whoever is available to it, then it will find the best vehicle for it. Just like how the voice selected Raw for this particular teaching or whatever.
I see, yeah, that's
it's meant to keep certain people out, bring certain people in, and the same is true for all mutations.
Yeah, and so there's going to be, okay, so yeah, that's a good point. And I guess, maybe what it is also, you might be seeing it as like there's agents of mutation in diverse places spread out, and in the world, and I think that can also be true. But it's interesting because I guess to look at the two different things, to look at the single mutative person among no mutants, and how wrong that can go sometimes. Mm-hmm. Really, they can just get, they can get taken out, for being so different. But then also, there's the times where you see these really mutative cores where, for instance, Kojève was teaching Hegel. So Kojève, not teaching Hegel, but he was teaching the theories of Hegel, who had died, 100 years prior. He was teaching Hegel's theories to Lacan and to Bataille. Lacan would go on to marry Bataille's wife, I think, at some point. Then wife. Really interesting things. Blanchot was either in the class or was kind of learning from them. Like, there was this real mutative core that gave rise to all these movements like deconstruction, French deconstruction, post-structuralist philosophy, and these are obviously really mutative things and really experimental and so on. And you have like these sort of mutant freak geniuses or kind of giants of the era. And so then the question is, how do you know who's mutative and who's mutation adjacent, and where does being historical or notoriety play a part of that? Right? And I don't think it always does, like you're saying, it doesn't always. But some people are just on the scene, but they're nevertheless brushing shoulders. But it's not about notoriety even among, it's more just about like, if we could just trace where the things happened. Like, where did jazz emerge? That was a mutative scene. Not everybody's in the history books, not everyone's famous in that way, but if they were on that scene, they were hanging out with the people who would go on to be hugely famous for 100 years. So you see what I'm saying? It's like, there are like giants that kind of history, and the giants of history don't necessarily coincide with the mutation, but typically do in interesting ways, in the sense that you typically find yourself brushing shoulders 1 degree of separation from so many people and so many different scenes where you can almost see the brushing shoulders with as a mutation adjacent. And I had the realization last week or 2 weeks ago, and I'm still playing with it. I'm trying to think of a non-arrogant way of saying it, but it's almost just like turning around. And so, if you're at a certain position on that fractal line, it's a fixed position. Every life you come back, assuming you come back, by the way. And it's only 1 in 600 people. That's 4% of 4% is what is member Ra calculated from his calculations of the original shattering and all this stuff. And if you look at this, you're like 4% of 4%, and you come back every life, if you're lucky, if your body's not disturbed, in which case you become a rogue crystal bundle. Your personality crystal is not that you would know, because you don't have any matter, any meatware to actually know that or have the self-reflective consciousness experience, but that's what your personality crystal ends up getting used for. So just as an incidental side note, becomes this instrument for the rogue crystal bundle, which itself is just a mechanism. It's not self-reflective consciousness like us either, but it definitely has a certain flavor to it and a certain imprint, quality. But in any case, like that, if you are coming back and you're part of the same little group, then, the realization I had a couple weeks ago, and versions of it had dawned on me before, but like, I think it was good that I didn't realize this before, because it would have been arrogant, or even now it might sound arrogant, but it's not. It was just realizing that throughout my life, I have known so many really, really legitimately famous people who are at really pivotal moments in history. Just an abnormal number of them. And I always felt like I was so lucky to know them, and I'd always come so close to their fame. Like, probably one of the first ones was when I was 14 years old, meeting Michael Shreve, who of course was a drummer for Santana and played the drum solo in Woodstock that catapulted him to fame and had an incredible life. And I'd always felt so honored and so lucky and all this stuff to meet them. And then I realized that if I turn it around a little bit, in a lot of cases I was disappointed by the people that I met, that they really weren't as mutative, and I realized that I was actually the one that was weirder or more, because for instance, when I was hanging out with Mike Shreve, he was really into Metatron. And Metatron is some kind of, people in LA are into it. I don't really know what Metatron's about, but it's like, maybe you ask for like assistance for like some Ascended Brotherhood stuff, or like manifesting your destiny and all this stuff. And he was into it and talking about it with Alan Howarth, who wrote the Poltergeist theme song and co-wrote music with John Carpenter. I worked with Alan Howarth on a near daily basis for months for the Experience Music Project as a production assistant for Michael Shreve, when I was 16 years old. So I've gotten to work with these really interesting, really famous people. Even just in my music projects, I've worked with Matthew Garrison, for instance, which was not a connection through Mike Shreve. It was a completely separate, randomly different connection. Just because Matt Garrison is obviously one of these mutative freaks. He's been Herbie Hancock's bassist for God knows how long, 20 years. His dad was Jimmy Garrison, John Coltrane's bassist for God knows how long. Independently of knowing Matt, I transcribed interviews with Elvin Jones, John Coltrane's drummer, who I met personally, talking about Matt's dad, Jimmy Garrison, hours of interviews talking about being on road trips with him. So you see these really weird transpersonal ways that people's lives karmically interconnect. And maybe one more example is my good friend who just went to New Orleans, met a man named David, whose dad was a very, very well-known jazz drummer who had played with Charles Mingus and Miles Davis and everybody. And we spent hours together just talking about that community and those of Black American music. Now that is a mutative core within Black American music, and with jazz, there's other mutative cores. There's mutative cores within obviously West Coast psychedelic culture and Santana, psych rock, I met probably the most mutative psych rock musicians from Guadalajara because they would come to Seattle every year for the Psych Fest. And we'd hang out for 3 weeks. You met some, I guess you'd already moved to LA, but my friends Obi and I'm just saying, we find each other, we do. The people that are part of that mutative core find each other. But the realization I was having a few weeks ago was that when I met somebody who was really famous, maybe, and part of the same tangential scene, they still might be 2, 3, 4 steps down the fractal line from me, away from the really mutative stuff. Because the scene is, no, I'm serious, they're into Metatron, they're into manifestation culture, they're into, prayer for your, so I mean, that's what's working for them, but they couldn't handle human design. They wouldn't even be interested in human design, right? They would just turn around and leave when you start talking about human design. And with Mike Shreve, he's a manifester, actually. I tried to get him into it. I really was informing him of how exciting, human design is and so on, and he wasn't having it. But I'm just saying, it's not that human design is the ultimate acid test or litmus test, because I do think it can take people time to get into human design. So some people, obviously, there's going to be like false negatives. You're going to say, hey, check out human design. They're going to be like, not interested. And they're still obviously going to be, I was like that for 9 years. I was. And I also used to be interested in conspiracy theories. I was never as crazy as some of the people I hear now with the stuff. But, I did go see David Icke talk. I didn't know he was anti-Semite, all that stuff now. And I know it's associated with hate groups and stuff. I am just saddened by the whole thing. I just saw him as a very confused, then I was just interested in anybody that had anything different to say. But of course it ends up being the same stuff, or what you have is, what's really sad is somebody who is probably part of that mutative fractal line, but is lost, or is basically endlessly lost in their transference. I wouldn't be surprised to find out that some of these conspiracy theorist people are innocents transferred to their desire because they're made it a crusade, to take down the demonic evil people and so on. But really they're just supposed to be innocents. They don't really, or that there's other versions of it too, that they're desire people who are obsessed with aliens, for instance. I don't want to single out innocence people, or that they're hope and they're obsessed with persecuting and making people pay for the guilt and so on. So, there's a lot of variance of this. But bringing it back to the original conspiracy theory, no, there's nothing wrong with bringing it back to conspiracy theory. No. Nothing wrong with it at all. The conspiracy theory thing is that the people coming up with the conspiracy theories are on the outside looking in of history. Because here's what I'm trying to say. I'm into human design. Not everybody who's mutative is into human design. But there is absolutely an insider-outsider thing. Like, I was in Techstars, that they're insiders. Insiders are not bad. Insider means people who are part of the mutative core, who are really trying to experiment, who are really trying to, there's the inside, and then people who are on the outside make up all sorts of stories about people on the inside, about what they're doing. Well, try making up a story about what me and Mike are doing right now. Don't think we're arguing, someone next door. They don't know what the hell we're doing. You don't know what the hell these people are doing. The idea that these conspiracy theorists come up with all of these, amazing, ridiculous stories about what people are doing, right? What people are doing. Hang out with them. Go to the mutative core. I've been to these mutative cores. I've hung out in a room with 70 people who each had more money than I can make in 10 lifetimes, doing my current salary, because I'm not saying that all of them, obviously some of them end up there third, fourth, fifth, sixth, generation away, but you can tell, and those are when you really find the mutative cores like Techstars, they're not interested in the Stanford business grads. They're not interested in the credentials, because those are a dime a dozen. What they're interested in are the people that really, truly are the mutants who are on the cutting edge. They're interested in the geniuses, the mutants, the freaks. They're interested in the Elon Musks of the world. They want to find the next Elon Musk. Say what you will about him, he's doing something. I don't have much opinion about him. I haven't formed a lot of opinion about him, but I saw him on Joe Rogan smoking pot. I don't even watch Joe Rogan, but somebody just showed me the clip.
That's your latest Elon update, is that he was on Joe Rogan?
No, I saw him doing. I saw him. His most recent thing is that he's not accepting Bitcoin, and that caused the whole market to tank. So, as far as I know, I don't follow these things.
Yeah, that guy's up to something.
This is your news for the day. No, Elon's always up to something. But I'm just saying, like, as an example, I was at dinner with one of our friends who's a former Dada art collector and a Dada art gallery owner from Chicago, who had somebody over for dinner who's like a brilliant PhD from the Complexity Institute, and he was talking about how he couldn't say who it was, of course, but pretty sure it was Elon Musk, And I'm just saying, like, I mean, maybe not, it could have been somebody else, but it was somebody of that caliber. I mean, the kinds of people that are moving and shaking. And again, I've always had this, wow, I want so bad to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. I want so bad to be in that, you know what I mean? And I've had this, and then turning myself around and seeing it completely the other way, of going, wow, those people got 2 degrees away from me, or this person had dinner with me, and we never once talked about human design, because I don't bring it up with people if they're not into it, if I don't think that they're mutative, or I don't think that there's some potential. I really don't. I really am careful to like wait and notice somebody, or if they're asking me for it. Even if they do, I'll sometimes, not go into it. So with you, I talk about it all the time because we love sharing our notes. I mean, when you're able to talk about it with somebody, it's the coolest thing because you're both on the same metaphysical research program together. You're on the same fractal line, at the same level of fractal line. You're one degree. Fractal lines. Yeah. Well, I mean, the way that he talks about it is degrees. So you're right. If somebody's 1 degree away from you on the fractal line, that means that's the most direct they can be. That they are literally the next step over. You can directly communicate with them. If they are multiple degrees away, you're going to continually have to alter your communication down to this. Yeah, and it's really, there's different ways of thinking about it. I've talked about crawling my way up the fractal line. What I meant by that was like, okay, if people out there who are into conspiracy start getting into human design maybe, or start, getting into something else that is a different, like an archetypal understanding, like archetypal astrology.
Isn't it just crawling your way into more of your life? Because you're not really changing your fractal line, you're just losing the performance of a different fractal line, right?
It's okay. You're losing. You're finding you're living your design. You're finding your way back, but it's also finding your way to the real information sources, the information sources that are for you,
the real ones,
the real information sources at the level of the mutative core that you're at. And so there are absolutely other mutative things. I see it with objective personality group, for instance. They are so much on the game. Like, objective personality are probably one of the most mutative, compared to any of the other research programs. Cognitive type wasn't viable. It couldn't create a gene pool almost. It couldn't get up to the level of, it's amazing to see it.
I mean, it's WA or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It couldn't get up to that level. It just stayed like a tribal elder, saying what's what. But I'm talking about Juan Sandoval's personality typology program called Cognitive Type. But you see these different, and there are different mutative groups, and they also do get stagnant at times, and they lose their mutative potential, and they also do, get corrupted in the sense of letting in more and more people farther down the fractal line who are not actually, they're just there for the scene. They're not actually there because they're not actually mutating. They're not there for the mutation. They're there for the scene, right? And you see people who aren't, and you can tell who's really just kind of on the scene. That's part of, I mean, you can't always, but I mean, no, I mean, there is the ability to discern. I mean, even like I put it this way: any documentary is basically a documentary of mutation. Basically, it's a documentary of a mutative time. Something really crazy happened. Some kind of change happened. Some new thing emerged where there was previously nothing. And here's what happened. Here's how that new thing emerged. Here's how the Beatles happened. Here's how Jane Goodall discovered stuff about the whatever. They're all about. I mean, okay, some of them are going to be about, I guess, experiential things, right? Because the mutation is really individual. But even the individual, it happens in between the notes. It happens in a cut. They cut and they say, and the next day he had written the piece, whatever. Or she had learned how to communicate to the gorillas, and they kind of show it, but it's not really, And so all of these really amazing times that have happened, it was basically the amount of people that could fit in a room together. Like it was a very, very small group of people who were part of that mutative thing. And what we've actually found, if it's 1 in 600, if it's 4% of 4%, that's actually more like 18 million people, 18 or 20 million people around the world, you know. But that's still not great, you know. I mean, that's
we gotta get
still,
those numbers up.
that's like not even 200 people in all of Santa Fe. But of course, it doesn't work that way. Santa Fe probably has 2,000 mutative people.
Yeah, they find their ways to go.
Because it's a disproportionate number of them because they've come to Santa Fe. But still, if it were equally distributed, it would be 200 in Santa Fe, just to put it in perspective, right? And it would be a few thousand in a big city, or maybe a few tens of thousands if it's a really big city like New York. But having these a few tens of thousands of people that are really mutative, or potentially mutative, I mean, you do see it, you do. You see where they self-select and they aggregate, but you also see where the mutations rise up and where there's communities that are really suffering and really hurting. For instance, even New Orleans, which was such a mutative time when jazz emerged, has really suffered in so many ways. I've seen that in the arts community there, and talking to people in the arts community of New Orleans, from just a lack of, basic material sustenance, in a way that other places don't necessarily suffer the same way. Like the mutative experiment at the Complexity Institute isn't suffering materially because they're getting $8 million grants left and right. There's no $8 million grants for arts communities down in New Orleans. So it's really interesting to see, but the viability of different mutations and what it really takes at a material level for the mutation to be viable and to take hold, and for a research project to really be cutting edge. And having attended events at Santa Fe Complexity Institute, it's the same thing. I felt so honored. When I was there, Cormac McCarthy was there. He hangs out there all the time. And so I got to meet Cormac McCarthy. I didn't even know who he was. I just thought, oh, there's another nice guy, nice gentleman, and talked to him, whatever. And then he introduced himself. And, it's, getting to meet these people, you feel like, wow, this is so cool that I get to kind of brush elbows with people that are part of such a mutative, experimental, these are obviously part of a historically experimental clique. Cormac McCarthy is friends with people there who were close friends with Richard Feynman, who is the father of nanotechnology among many other technologies, and was just a brilliant person whose books I've read. These are heroes and stuff, So to kind of see that and then to realize, okay, wait a minute, but obviously, if people are like myself and like you and like people that are really getting into human design, if you're watching this, probably like you at home, really into it, we are actually part of that 1 in 600, that 18 million. And they probably are too. It doesn't automatically mean we're all friends. They probably are too, but they might have been so deeply conditioned that they might have even forgotten what it was really like to have been, you know what I mean? And who knows? It's to really put it in a very different perspective, that you are not coming to the other person as somebody who is lucky to be in their presence, groveling to be in their presence of greatness. You're coming to somebody else, to the other, as yourself. And what you really are is something that is an extreme rarity in this world. Someone that is actually able to experience the difference between themselves and the other person with lucid clarity, and is able to actually witness their own decision-making process and be able to put out a clear emotional energy or a clear sacral energy, and to have a certain clarity that, it doesn't mean, I'm transpersonal, I'm a 5-1, so they might be an enemy. There's people that are your enemies every life. They are.
Rivals.
There's rivals every life. There's,
Foils.
Yeah, I'm sure, it's interesting. I wonder, I've wondered before with my open head if that means that every time you come into a life that you must be part of the right angle or left angle. No, I don't think it works like that. I think you get to develop parts of it. I just think when you're on the right angle, you don't really see it. When you're gaining experience, you're teaching your unconscious, so to speak. When you're in the left angle process, which we both are, as a 6-2 and a 5-1, part of being on that left angle is the transpersonal karmic connection that you have with other people, where you really recognize, you recognize the reality of past life, and you recognize that every time you do have a life, you do end up, if you're lucky, being able to find your way back to the same level that, you know what I mean? You climb your way to that level if you can.
Now, find where you've left yourself little loot boxes. box.
You find where you left yourself loot boxes. That's a good way of putting it. It's like I, really was slumming it in some different places and trying to find my people. And I did find some really interesting people. When I was 17 years old, I was playing music with, Reggie Watts, for instance. I don't think of him as a famous person. It's hard for me. Once you've known somebody when they're not famous, it never really converts in your mind. And even if I see him on a TV show or something, I just see him as Reggie Watts. I don't see him as a famous person. And so then when people are impressed or surprised, I just kind of go, for a while I've realized that something rubbed me the wrong way about, this idea. Like, I really think that famous people are very mutation adjacent. I think there's a mutation adjacent to them, lots of times. And actually, I think it could be one of the not-self traps of people who are potentially mutative, that instead of really living their design, instead of getting to do something like human design that helps you live your design, or instead of just naturally falling into it somehow, or really living out what they're meant to do, they end up selling their mutativeness for fame, for fortune, for whatever it is, trying to cash in on it. Because people can tell. People can tell there's something special about that one, there's something weird about that one. They can tell somebody's a little mutative, In the old days, they would make that person a shaman. Ra would have been a shaman, If getting reincarnated again and again and again means you've had to play out the mutative role again and again and again. It's not like you're not mutative one life. It's not like one life you get to just hang out and be the farmer. No, in that life, you're still being the shaman in that scenario.
You can be the mutative farmer.
Well, sure, but if you are, you're still going to be the freak that they all go, that one's different, and that stands out, and that people see that there's something different about that one. And there is about the really mutative people, and it really depends how mutative they are. But there really are the, people in the world that are all over the world that are very much gifted or, I guarantee if you look at the guy who has 200 IQ or the, woman who could beat chess masters as a little kid or all these different people, they're mutative. Like, they're part of that mutation, they're part of that thing, and that's why they've all found their way, more or less, into the same circles, more or less. Now there's, the same thing with like the circles of EGS or something, but there's some people who kind of walked into the wrong building and stumbled in there and went, whoops, and that's why, Ra got so sick of doing these human design things. He came in when he did Sedona, he gave talks to Sedona, gave talks to Taos, Santa Fe. I have lectures from him in Santa Fe. And he's trying to introduce human design to people, and he's trying to get them into it. And it would lead him to later say, I just wanted to walk down the aisle. I wish I could walk down the aisle with a samurai sword. Better luck next life. Just go along and just get rid of the non-mutative people, because why are they even there for a human design? Now, I know that's so callous. I've heard someone else refer to certain people as NPCs, which is another very callous way of talking about non-player characters. And I don't mean to say this, that it doesn't matter for, I'm just saying for human design. Like, they don't need to be in human design. Let other people be in human design when they're more interested in it. If you're just gonna argue about it the whole time or whatever, not that I think people do this generally, but on the internet especially, if you're not really interested in, if you are interested in human design, great, wonderful. You're probably one of these mutative people, and what that means is that you really are able to understand the transmission of information presented to you. And some people, you try to transmit that information to them, and it's a completely blank expression. There's nothing there. There's no transmission of information. So that's all I'm saying, is that it doesn't. But there's so many different factors. I've been learning base theory lately, and how certain people. Certain people are designed to be able to transmit information to everybody, and certain people aren't. And and then the nodal bases are fascinating because they really show who you're going to be really attracted to, what kinds of personalities you're going to be attracted to. And what's interesting. It's funny when you get into base theory, just since we've been talking so much about the mystical side of it, when you talk about your personality crystal, the personality crystal, the one that's actually reused again and again and again, the same, the same one, that one is always the same base, because that is the base that it was on at the point of shattering, or whatever. You can say that's the base that it ended up the point, like, since the beginning, since the shattering of the crystal, it's always been the same base. And it's not like it just happens to, like, end up in the same orientation every time. Like, it literally is, like, that is the one way that it takes neutrino information, and it's through that facet of crystalline crystal. So it's pretty fascinating to think about. It's, like, literally the exact same thing every time. That we are actually, in some sense, then, hardwired to be able to connect to the same kinds of people. Like, we just naturally do. All right. Do you have any ideas about? Was that really disturbing to you? That it was that the idea of the kind of like elitist idea that certain people are very mutative and others aren't.
Did I find that hierarchical in some way? I don't know.
It's very hierarchical. I mean, that's not my question. Is the hierarchy disturbing? It's hierarchy all the way. Are you disturbed by the thought of hierarchy? I mean, do you disagree? It's okay to. Like, I'm not the voice, and we're all interpreting Ra's interpretation of the voice, and what Ra told us his experience of the voice was. So
I pray that mutation is merciful enough for it to not fully disclose where we are on its hierarchy. I don't think we should ever expect to be able to position ourselves in proximity to the core. I don't think that would make sense or be very conductive to our communal process.
Well, what is okay? Yeah, maybe
I could use
course.
my
I said course. I said mutative course.
Okay. I could use my imagination to take us anywhere in terms of how mutative someone could possibly be.
So like anyone could be mutative at any time in your models, because we just don't know. I guess it's true. People do lead.
I've got a scenario for you.
Mm-hmm.
How about speaking about Herbie Hancock? How about the literal watermelon man? The man that Herbie Hancock observed selling watermelon that was immortalized as song, and now we're speaking about today, right? What was up with this guy? What was he up to? He is in a way responsible for everything that came of that jazz.
I mean, if he really was a character, I don't know enough about Watermelon Man, but like we have a friend, Von Paul, check out Von Paul Artist on Instagram, who's a total character, who doesn't live human design, who isn't famous, who isn't any of these things, but is obviously a mutative freak genius. And you see the amount of weird, bizarre,
and he does the brushing all those things.
Synchronistic connections. It's like mutation adjacent. But, and so did Watermelon Man, right? So maybe Watermelon Man is one of these known characters in the community that was so, interesting and cool and whatever else that he did get immortalized in the song because, I think what it is that certain people are really able to break through the conditioning. And it's really kind of almost like the Paul Newman Cool Hand Luke, or like, what we really like a lot of times in a person is their extreme differentiation, like their ability to be so differentiated, to really be themselves, and how singular that is, and how you remember certain things, like they have differentiated outer authority, how the effect of other people is differentiated. So, and they what's interesting is, it's not that I think that the only people who are mutative have learned human design or something like that. I mean, how could it be? Throughout history, there have been mutative people. But I just think about how you can immediately recognize their differentiated outer authority and what's so unique and particular about them. And I think there is a sadness and a grieving to realize that not everybody is on that particular fractal, but that's okay. I think most people we know are. Like, the good news is, the bad news is there is a mutative core. The good news is you know all of them. I don't know if that's true. Okay?
I mean, it's just about finding your people, right?
It's about finding your people wherever you are. Wherever you are. Okay.
Play your part.
Okay.
You don't have to know where you are.
It's a very sweet idea.
You don't have to know where you are. Just do what you do with the people that make sense for you. Because it's like, wherever you're supposed to be, it's like you're going to get reinforcement from that. You're going to connect with the people.
Well, yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, if you're in Knoxville and you're like, I can't find anybody cool in Knoxville, everyone sucks in Knoxville, then it's reason to leave, because you got to, like, find your way up towards your fractal family. Find your fractal family, people. Yeah, we don't need to make it a sad, negative thing. I was trying to think of a couple of my favorite. I was just trying to remember this one earlier because it was so good, and I was thinking of. Okay, you know what? I'm not gonna. Yeah. I'll share it for next time. I have a few more fun ones I'm going to go through. So, okay, we've done mutation adjacent.
Okay.
We've done conspiracy theories in Penta. The last thing I'll say about that is just that I think we've done that, but Penta really shows us how conspiracy works. And the last thing I want to say about that is just that There's a Jonathan Franzen book called The Corrections, where I never read this book, but I read an interview with him in a magazine where he was saying that he basically wanted to do conspiracy stuff and like noirish, like big conspiracies and so on, but he ended up rewriting the whole book and doing the whole thing as family as conspiracy. And that the family unit was somehow conspiring against the people, and was somehow the conspiracy. I just thought, wow, he must have just happened across that.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my first thought with the Penta too, like family's original Penta, if that's where conspiracy comes from, that makes sense.
Yeah, it is kind of. So, I mean, I think Penta pressure comes from the family. It comes from the gene pool where the Penta says, as soon as you have a Penta, as soon as you have 3, you've had 1 kid, you need to have another kid because you need at least 2 kids to keep the gene pool viable. If you have less than 2 children, the population shrinks per pair. Right? So it's interesting. Interesting one. Okay, here are a few. Okay, see, I always want to do the generator thing. I instinctively do the generator thing, and I say, do you want to do a question? You ready for a question?
Let's get it.
Let's get it. Let's do it. Okay. I'd like a little of that water as well. Oh, let's say I have some here. I'll take it.
Water?
Yeah. That's been a little inside joke. Okay, here we go. So question, can you overcome money issues? This was an actual question asked in the Human Design Group. Can you overcome money issues by not focusing on lack?
Wow, that's a weird question. Oh, I see. That's like that's a new age thing where it's like if you have a poverty mindset, then you're more likely to experience poverty. Is that what
this person says life is always abundant, but when spirit is missing, we focus on what bad. Well, I mean, there actually is a human design perspective on this. There is. I mean, there's a number of human design perspectives on this.
There's a bunch of
when did you start?
Well, money. I mean, when you bring up money in human design, there's a bunch of places to go with it. Because you always can make money through the not-self. But then you have to be the not-self more. It's like you instrumentalize yourself too. I always think of it as the circulatory system of the not-self, money, the transmission of capital.
Money is because the circulatory. Because people they do the not-self stuff to get it.
Yeah.
So it's the circulatory system of the not-self. I love it. It's like the blood of the not-self that pumps through people doing things they don't really want to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
They don't really want to do it. And they're like, I got to do it to get the money.
Yeah.
I want the money. I don't want to do it, but I'll do it anyway.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, you do have to betray yourself a bit to make money through the not-self. But you can do it. You're in a pinch, and you think you can find your way back. Just like go be not self for a while.
When spirit is missing, we focus on lack. Yeah, this idea also, I think there is a human design perspective. So first of all, like the usual human design answer is mentally, you can't mentally decide to not focus, you know what I mean? You can't just mentally decide to do something and then manifest more money or whatever by your mental decision making. That's the vanity of the mind thinking it's in control and all this stuff. But I think beyond that, that's not a very informational answer. There's not much information content in that answer. It's just like, no.
I have a caveat for it too.
Yeah.
Isn't there a thing, especially like as a generator, the clarification and the noticing what your desire is? Because when I think about like something like law of attraction or whatever, I know that a lot of the time there's like a money component to that. I think the human design mechanical version of law of attraction for a generator is like holding on to the pressure of what you want, of that like sacral thing that wells up about what you want in order to clarify what it is and to draw it to yourself in a more complete or accurate or greater definition way. And that's why you don't want to puncture that sacral desire before it's ready, right? Because then you get like a partial or incomplete version of that thing that you're attracted to. So.
Yeah, I mean that is like a much more in-depth, better way of describing the actual mechanics of how a sacral response actually works. Is it builds up, but I mean it can also it can atrophy too if the mind is preventing it from doing whatever. But it builds up and it's basically, like you said,
if the mind is trying to decide what it is instead of listening to what is. Right?
Yeah. Or if it's trying to fight it, if it's a libidinal urge in some sense, that I think there's a lot of, it's interesting to me. I think that the sacral response is a kind of pressure that is like a libido in some sense. It's not necessarily looking for sex in the same way that libido in psychoanalysis is not just about sex. Obviously, the sacral does have some relationship with sexuality. Well, yeah, I think that these are all great comments, and that the idea is that that you can wait to see what the sacral is really responding to as it builds up, as it is a burgeoning response, as you're saying. And that's not going to necessarily overcome money issues, but it's going to at least get the clarity of what that sacral response really is, and they know, wow, I actually really am responding to this. I actually really dig this. I actually really enjoy this.
Now I don't care about if I have the same amount of money in some cases.
Sure, yeah, that they're really enjoying. Right, so in that sense,
it's like if circumstances change, you could find yourself not needing the amount of money that you thought you needed. If you find yourself in another situation, in another place in the world.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's just like different amounts of money are relevant to different people's stories because we're all here to live in different contexts. And it's like for some person's story to play out, they're going to need more money than another person.
Right, and having like really experiential stuff, you need more money for the experiential. That's what I found. Just as a side note. Okay. Here's another interesting one. Let's see. So people are talking a lot about looking at your design only, and then based on your energy type, but looking only at the design. So, I'm still a design generator, but this is interesting. This is from Dressing Your Truth, and this is Carol Tuttle, and then combined with
cool concept.
Holly Elizabeth doing a categorization, a cross-reference categorization. This is from the Human Design Astrology group, so if you want to see the original post, for credit and so on, just go on to Human Design Astrology and look up Holly Elizabeth, Carol Tuttle, Dressing Your Truth. So I guess it's looking at only the design chart, though. So this person says, for example, I'm a projector. My centers are only filled because of my personality aspects. So my design is that of a reflector. So here's the thing, like, all the people are making a really big deal about design type. Like, this is never something that I've used or analyzed significantly, except in terms of keynoting the channels for design side versus personality side versus mixed.
Is your design ever alone? What about sleep? That's just a different chart altogether.
You don't even have the same design. It's the same personality with a different design.
So that design never, I can't imagine a circumstance where
right,
the design's ever apart from the
So thank you. So I don't think I'm crazy here. So for people watching, put in the comments if you know of any use of just looking at the design or just looking at the personality, other than in keynoting, where we kind of do, certain, analysis of someone who might be more on the body and unconscious side or on the conscious and kind of personality side. And it's interesting that we equate the body and the unconscious, but that also is kind of, it's not a strict equation, but it does seem that in some sense the design is something like a combination of the unconscious and the bodily intelligence, although in some sense also the bodily intelligence comes from the quantum, which is the sum, right? I mean, it's coming from the design side into the quantum. But for instance, if your splenic authority is fully conscious, you could be a design reflector, but you could still be a projector, right? A splenic projector, or you could be a splenic manifestor, something if you have root coming up, to the throat. And I guess what I'm saying is, it just seems to me that the quantum is what causes the strategy and authority, or what we can access strategy and authority, and the alignment of the vehicle is the alignment of the vehicle as quantum. And at that point, what we get from the design tone is a sort of clean transmission of the cognition, which is one of 6 tones. But yeah, so this is, in me, I'm a, just for fun, I'll do it. So I am a generator still on the design side. Do you happen to know what you are on the design side?
I'm still a projector on both sides.
You're still a projector on both sides. Okay. So I'm a type 1. My primary movement is upward, light, buoyant, and random. Yours is fluid, flowing, relaxed, and subtle.
My body?
Your primary movement.
Oh.
I don't really know what that means, but I also like that I've just been reading base theory, and movement is such a keynote in base theory. It's base 1,
Yeah.
and it is primary. Everything's movement. But there's nothing to compare it to, so it doesn't feel like it's moving. You know? That's what's so funny about it. But, upward, light, buoyant, and random. These are characteristics of a generator. But see, the thing is, I need to compare that now to somebody who only has personality activation. See, I'm not buying it. I'm just not buying it. But okay, natural gifts. Ideas. I have a new idea, and we can do it for you. Details. What details would we need to make a plan? So they see projectors. This is kind of muddling of the keynotes. I don't like when people use keynotes that have very specific meanings in human design for something that doesn't mean that. Because when he uses the keynotes, he uses the words the same way consistently, for the most part. When he talks about internalization and externalization themes and stuff like that, he uses like the design internal, design external, these kind of very specific terms. And yeah, especially with details. To say that all projectors are detail-oriented, I don't think that's true. Okay, I think I got to the point where it says I have light-hearted extrovert energy with a priority for happiness. I don't. It actually does sound pretty. I guess pretty generators are into the puppy dogs, aren't they? I see why they say that. Generators are such the puppy dogs. You know what I mean? Fun-loving, bright, optimistic. Projectors, gentle, tender, and sensitive. Hey, it's going pretty good so far, actually. Easygoing, introvert energy. Priority, comfort. It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Well, so even though these auras are always around each other, the aura of the design and the aura of the personality, they are a juxtaposition for a reason. They're not a synthesis. The quantum is not a synthesis. It's held apart.
Okay, but yes and no.
It's
The personality and the
aura,
design. The personality and the design are held apart. But when you have mixed design, in the aura, you're getting the electromagnetic between the two, I guess. I mean, that's pretty cool to think about.
Yeah.
Like, your channel struggle is mixed, and so you're getting that.
And my 1949, I think.
But like, okay, 1949.
And my 6124. 3 of my channels are mixed.
Okay, interesting, yeah. So having these mixed channels then, this is a great segue into Teresa Blanding and John Martin's assertion that mixed or personality side channels don't wield authority. Because in their case, you would still, instead of trusting, because you would trust your design tone, and the outcome of the design tone, rather than, you wait 28 days like a reflector and notice how different days your design tone is a little different. Only after that long amount of time, perhaps, your design, or maybe you wouldn't wait at all. Maybe you would just, I could have that wrong, but maybe what they're saying is just as soon as you can apprehend that design tone, the moment you get it, the moment you get the design tone, and you make the decision based on that. I don't think that is the case. I haven't found that to be true yet, but that's another interesting one because I wonder if people really focusing on the design side is something. Well, I think a number of people have encouraged this, and I think it's really a misunderstanding, or it's not a misunderstanding, but it's just it might not mean what people think it means. In genetic matrix is one person. John calls it the body side. He has body charts, and he says you're a body reflector, and you're a mind. This and that, and I think that telling people that information is not really great. Because they start to feel like, well, I'm a design manifester. There's a lot of manifesting generators that are like, I'm a design manifester.
So why does imaging software even give us these options then?
Well, obviously Ra was looking at that. I mean, it was something that he even used, and so let's look at the way he looked at it. And the way he looked at it was primarily keynoting. I don't know why, to say that you're a design reflector or something like that. Maybe there are some very significant differences. I mean, here's the thing. any information we have on a difference, we should track. We should absolutely track that information. Okay, we should try to track what do we know about people who are design reflectors. What do we know about people who, you know what I mean?
Well, you know, something that people resonate with a lot, that I think might have been Trevor's discovery, is the design reflector and the personality reflector, and their relationship with showers and bathing, and that they're disproportionately refreshed by these things. And
really?
And so that, like, with the body, it's obvious, because if the body's on its own just a clear casting lens, then physically washing it is going to physically, whatever, clean off that lens.
Okay.
And then on the personality side, it's that the mind is associating the act of showering with the concept of cleaning and using it almost as a
mental refreshment or something.
Yeah, a permission slip to refresh itself internally or whatever.
Yeah, a lot of people
doing that through association.
There's a lot of people who have ideas in showers and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, right.
You know,
That's a really good one.
There's a phenomenon there.
Because so the testimony from people that are reflectors on one side or the other is that the personality reflectors do feel that they get a mental, psychological reset from taking a shower, and that the design reflectors get a very physiological reset from the shower.
Okay, I mean, I think everyone does, but I think research
part of
needs
it
to be
too,
done. But I mean, maybe they have some special. I mean, I'd want to just track. I mean, I love Trevor's analysis. He does go into that. He's our quad right.
I bring it up just because I've used it with so many clients at this point, and they do, and it is pretty. And again, there is that Barnum effect of everyone having a relationship with showers and feeling refreshed by it, and bathing in general.
Yeah, I mean,
classical symbol.
I mean, I don't necessarily. And also for people who have touch, like I have touch in my design external, and I need to get like the icky off of me sometimes, even just energetically. But you know, I do that for other ways too, like going for a walk. But yeah, I think there might be something to the difference in having personality or design side activation, especially like looking at the exact same channel in two different people, and looking at how it operates on the personality and design side, and then trying to find more examples of that. You know, if you can see how maybe a personality side person has to talk it through a little more. Maybe they have to process its personality activation of the solar plexus. They have to talk through their emotions. You know, it is possible that emotions do get stuck without some sort of personality action involved. Right? And the design side is fully operating on the unconscious, so it's different. More like the personality says, I want to go to the party, but my unconscious is like, no, you're going to stay home and be sad tonight. Whereas, you know, the conscious definition is way more like, I don't want to go to the party, but I have to talk through this thing and do my part as being consciously involved with it to process it. So that, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, the way I see it is when you have unconscious design, you're just not aware of what your body's doing. Like somebody can have an unconscious 59-6 and they can be unconsciously breaking intimacy barriers with somebody without them even realizing it. They don't even know they're doing it. And if you ask them if they want to, they're like, of course not. And they're like, but you are. And they're like, well, I didn't notice. I didn't realize I was doing that. You know, and if it's on the conscious side, with my 29-46, I think sometimes I just need a certain amount of information for it to really kick in. And I think there is an informational aspect where it's not just physical information, there's actually psychological or mental, or whatever you want to call it, information. And then it really does kick in, and it is physiological. It's not like the sacral response is any less physiological because it's triggered by a conscious channel. It's still a physical response. It's just triggered, but not even by a thought, but by somebody else saying certain things or in a certain psychological scenario even. So that's an interesting. I'm still kind of I'm still workshopping this. I haven't quite figured it out. Okay, so we had that one. I have a few more. And then what we've done, whopping an hour and 8 minutes. So thanks for hanging in there.
We got into 2 questions.
We got into 2 questions. Okay. So here's one. I have problems with labels given in human design. Incorrect. Because I am now living out. Oh, they're saying, and they correctly have problems with labels. So let's address that one first. Problems with labels in human design. I mean, if you have problems with labels in human design, you're probably not on the fractal. I mean, sorry. I mean, of human design. Maybe you're on Gene Keys. Maybe you're 1 or 2 removed. Maybe if you really like human design, you can make your own version of it with your own labels. You can write your own Ray V. Ching. I mean, Ross suggested this. You can have your own personal relationship with planets. He suggested that for everyone. You know, why not? Go off on your own research program. But don't necessarily interfere with all the people doing human design. Just go off and make your own. Or Or, keep experimenting with it. Try different names for certain things. See what you like. Just don't, do everyone a favor and don't go around telling people you're doing human design with these different names and different ways of explaining it and so on. But that's the cool thing about human design. It really is, it works on a lot of levels. And I think people are going to find it useful. That's what I'm starting to realize, is that not everyone who says they're into human design really is. And some of the people who say they're into it are actually 4 or 5 or 6 degrees removed, and they're actually really into something else, like content marketing, but they want to use human design for content marketing. Well, let them do it. No problem. No sky off my back. Maybe somebody will find their way to human design through their content marketing thing. There's no shame in that. You can find your way to human design through anything. We should destigmatize finding your way to the mutative stuff, because the fact of the matter is, you can be in a content marketing course with 30 other people, and 29 of them are just like this, and you're the only one who actually is interested in finding your way to the mutative stuff. So, this really disturbs Mike when I when I bring up the.
I like that. I like the
good news. Well, the good news is, and the good news is, everybody that comes to us is probably on the mutative line for the most part. Very rarely
that watches your channel.
Very rarely do I want to get out the samurai sword. Okay. Because I'm living now an entirely other chart, my progressed chart, and the miscalculations with digital systems and awful times are coming when we start trusting prejudiced algorithms more than our own authorities. Okay, this is the level of commentary. This is the level of commentary on human design groups on Facebook. For people who don't know, okay, I'm just not gonna. But this person said. So my comment to myself was comment on progressed chart. Okay, so what I got out of this was this person was saying their chart is progressed. Human design doesn't take account of the progressed chart, therefore don't trust human design algorithm or something. I don't know.
It sounds like some personality.
Okay. Well, what I was going to comment on was the idea of the progressed chart, and is there an equivalent in human design? And I think there is not an equivalent in human design, but there is a solar return chart, which is not a progressed chart. I mean, maybe there's an equivalent. I don't know. Has anyone ever tried? I mean, I think there's something like progressions in human design where you regress 88 degrees of the sun for the chart, for the body graph, and you regress 88 degrees of the moon for the sleeping, the dream rave. And so each person has 2. When they go to sleep, they have that. So there's something like, but it's not really progression. It's definitely not progression. And there is a solar return chart, which is the chart you look at annually on the person's birthday. Which is what some people do sometimes.
And there's a Saturn return chart, right? Or isn't there every Saturn quarter there's a chart?
I've never done the Saturn quarter charts. But
that is the thing, right?
Well, Richard Rudd was very into that Saturn.
And Ra would like to do them for at least the first cycle of Saturn quarters.
Oh, nice.
Because those are really crucial developmental stages.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I think Ra was very open to applying some of these.
He might have even done them for an 8th or a 16th even. He really followed
into the Saturn, yeah.
Because it's like because up until the first Saturn return, obviously the developmental stages are really clear. Even when you look at a Saturn 16th at that point, there is a crazy transition around the age of 2 or 3.
Well, and that's a really good point that Mark Jones really tries to look at. Mark Jones, the evolutionary astrologer, looks at Saturn. I mean, he looks at other things too, but Saturn is a trauma. Everything's a damn trauma signature in evolutionary astrology. You ever notice that? No. Saturn's one of the trauma signatures too. In any case, you look at, I think it's like Uranus is the main one you look at, but Saturn is still these interesting having to do with loss and so on. And you look at 3.5. Yeah, I don't know if they get down to the 16th. Maybe. I mean, it makes sense. It doesn't hurt to, because you can see very clearly that there's a division in casting charts for what's going on at each of those points in time. Now, there are specific qualities to life cycle analysis in human design, which is the Saturn chart, the Uranus opposition, as well as the Chiron chart. So those have specific qualities in human design that are different from in how you would, you don't approach them the same way, you don't do the same kind of analysis, and they don't mean the same things, you can't get the same information from them. In short, in life cycle analysis, you really look at the profile, the incarnation cross, you kind of look at those together. Always look at profile and incarnation cross together, just as you basically always should, because really, for any right angle cross, there's going to be 7 variations for each. I mean, there's really 28 variations, right? Of each right angle cross. There's 28 combinations.
Damn, that's crazy.
Of a right angle cross with a profile.
Wow.
Yeah. That's why there's so few right angle crosses. There's only 4 variations for each left angle cross, and there's only, yeah. But in any case, you want to look at the profile and the cross of the time of the Saturn return. So you don't really look at, much else, like what channels were made during your Saturn return. You just kind of ignore that. I think people get really hung up on that when they look at their human design Saturn chart and they go, oh, there's the channel. You don't look at the channel, you look at the nodes. And you look at what lines they're on, you look at the nodal environment. That nodal environment is going to be a background environment for you. You also look at the incarnation cross with the profile. And you look at that, what that incarnation cross is all about, what that profile is all about. And even at a basic level, if you're a left angle changing to a right angle, you're going to be reducing the number of people in your life, and you're going to be much more in your own personal journey. And if you're right angle going from left angle, your life's going to become a lot more about other people. And you're going to have to think about other people. Maybe you'll have to devote your life to other people in certain ways, that you're not maybe expecting. So it's very different looking at that life cycle analysis compared to looking at solar return, which is much more analyzable in terms of like what forces you will meet that year, even what conditioning forces you will meet that year, even what people will come into your life that year. All of those things can be shown in the solar return chart. So for people who really geek out on trying to track those kinds of things, but there's nothing about progressions, I don't think. I've never done it anyway. Okay. Oh, this person just, this is great. This person just posted in the Human Design and PHS group, and I just like this, and then we can kind of wrap up. I'll put out a last little shout out here. But this person posted in the Human Design PHS group. Human Design Diet and PHS is really my baby. I was there in 2005 when we didn't know yet about the high sound, dark or light at night, colors, lights, low sound, and what. Yeah, in those days we didn't know anything for sure. We all just wondered and channeled and dosed and tried to see the K-line.
Cool.
I'm not sure what the K-line is, but I just love that. I don't know. I have no idea what the K-line is, but that was somebody who was hanging out with Ra in 2005. And, you can tell these are mutants, I mean, you can just tell. Okay. And then final shout out, unless you have anything you want to say to our watchers? Or?
2005 reminded me of a fact I just learned, which Ross said supposedly the first people that are capable of conceiving grave children are born in 2005, 2006.
Really?
So
Oh, that's so interesting.
Potential parents of the waves are
Okay.
right now like 16 or whatever.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. But it's only going to be after 2027 that they'll be born into a different conditioning field. Although we've already seen, like, Neptune already moved into 36 and kicked off that whole... Wow, how's everybody doing out there with Neptune in 36? That's a good... That's an interesting one. Just as a side note, I've definitely felt a difference in my breathing as a gate 12 since Neptune moved out of 22. I think of Neptune, Ra always says to develop your personal relationship to the planets. I was saying earlier today that I thought of Neptune as the surgeon who operates on the gate for, 1 to 3 years, depending on part of the cycle, or whatever it is, and operates on that gate, and then you can't tell what's going on. The curtain's up, the operating table, and so on. And then when Neptune leaves, that your relationship to that gate has changed. And I was also thinking about how different the Neptune neutrino stream is experienced as it hits us through that particular gate, in that particular part of the body that Neptune is a surgeon operating on. And how I feel so lucky that I was deep in the human design experiment before Neptune entered into gate 22. Because as somebody who's wanted to learn for a long time how to breathe and how to, it's almost like because I'm living my design more, Neptune was able to operate surgically on my breathing and on my gate 22 in a different way than if I hadn't been living my design that whole time. Because those whole 2 years or whatever Neptune was hitting me, I would have been in resistance, and I would have been fighting, and I would have been in bad health, and I would have been having all of these things. And so the fact that I've been in the human design experiment changes my relationship to the neutrino streams of the planets in such a way that I gained more benefit from Neptune operating on gate 22 for me. Because I do feel my breathing is different. I feel breathing different. Like my experience, my subjective experience of breathing is different. My ability to diaphragmatically breathe is different. I've really noticed a lot of changes since Neptune left 22. So I'm curious how it's going to change 36, when it leaves 36.
You went into passenger consciousness.
During that time, is what you're saying? Well,
yeah. I mean, it's the degree to which you're in passenger consciousness that Neptune was able to perform that work instead of being
who knows what Neptune would be doing if I wasn't in passenger consciousness? I mean, I think it depends on so many specifics of the person and where they are in their life and so on. But the operation that Neptune is really performing is dissolution. It's dissolving. It's dissolving old habits. It's dissolving, not even just habits, but it's just dissolving old ways of breathing, old forms of breathing, and old 22 things. I don't want to make 22 all about breathing, but for me as a 12, Ross says if you have 12 or 22 or the whole channel, you have to learn how to breathe. He says at a practical level to try singing, to sing and to do breath exercises. I practice diaphragmatic breathing. I love breathing in really big and then flexing out while I exhale and making my body even bigger as I exhale, pushing the air out. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I was never able to really do until these, past few months. So I've been practicing it while Neptune was still in 22. I tried years ago, I was never able to get it. As soon as Neptune left 22, I was able to feel it, and that's the difference. Mm-hmm. While Neptune was there, my breathing was changing. I didn't notice it, I couldn't feel it until Neptune left.
Mm-hmm. Being available to notice it instead of identifying it.
Yeah.
Because this is what we do not only with transits, but with people. That's the role of any open center, open gate, right? Is to be available as a witness. And the more that you identify with it, the more you stick to it, and the less it can do its work, like you said. It ends up doing something else.
It can't really do its job, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Each open center has a job to do. I mean, I even think of my undefined solar plexus as being perfectly equipped to really take in the other person's emotional state. And then with that information, do what I want with it, I mean, not what I want, but just do what I will. And I get to discover what that is usually. And, when it was not self, I would usually avoid that emotional information. I would kind of run away from it. I mean, one of my favorite, one last one, and then I'll make our little, announcement question. Unless you have any more. But one of my favorite memories of the summer was going out, did I tell this one in Human Design After Dark? It's my favorite.
I don't know.
Okay, well, I was going out hiking, and I went with a couple generators, and they're all emotionally undefined. And there's an emotionally defined manifestor in the group. And it's so good, right? And we all go, I'll tell the story. We all go hiking, and then the emotionally defined manifestor stays behind. He's like, I don't want to go, I'm staying behind. And then comes without informing us, and then we're not there because we already went back by that time. And then is so mad. And he's so angry. And I still can remember just laughing because one part of our group, one member of our group is the partner of this person and went out and they walked back together. And me and the other emotionally undefined guy, we see our, emotionally undefined friend just shirking and in terror, shrinking away from the emotionally defined manifestor, yelling and just, being so angry and emotional. Yeah, just all the way down, yeah. And they're walking back. And then my friend who's emotionally undefined, he goes, just go, let's go. And we start running. He starts to walk faster, I start to walk faster. And then afterwards, he's cracking up. He goes, dude, we literally just ran away from emotional confrontation. We saw emotional conflict, and you could feel the wind at your heels. I was like, oh, I felt it. We were running with purpose. We were fleeing from an emotional altercation. We did not want to experience the emotional discomfort of confronting this, getting blamed for leaving when the person had. Anyway, no blame, no shame. There's too many third lines in the world to go around full of blame. Okay, well, my last announcement is we're going to do a Human Design Insiders Conference. We have to figure out exactly when. But if anyone's interested, please contact and help us put it together. We're talking about a Human Design mini conference here in Santa Fe this summer.
We are? Who says this?
I didn't talk about it last time. I didn't during. I thought maybe during the.
That's cool.
Maybe during
I
the.
support that.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. We might even do it in this room. Who knows? This might be the actual room that it's in. This is our. Me and Mike have a retail space here. This is it. Right in Rail Yard District.
We are allowing 1 penta worth of people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a small place, but you know we could definitely do. Some pretty cool targeted groups and so on, and we could also do some outdoor things. So that would be cool. All right, that's it for the State of Human Design, May 17th. Thanks for watching all.